Hi, I'm Suzanne Scalise, and I have been helping people pass the Louisiana bar exam for over a decade. Because I have received so many emails and phone calls through the years, I decided that it would be helpful to create a short presentation about the bar exam. And hopefully this will help people, especially if you are coming from out of state and this bar exam is new to you. A lot of what I'm going to say in this quick presentation is public information, but some of it will be some tips and strategies and things that I think that I have learned through the years will be helpful for a lot of people. So I'm creating this in 2024. Anything that I say now is to the best of my knowledge. Of course, things can change through time, but as of now, this information that I'm going to give you is what I know. So what is the SPAR exam like? It is a 3-day bar exam, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 in the morning until 5 in the evening. It is closed book, which I think is pretty typical of many bar exams. It's usually taking place in Kenner, Louisiana, which is right outside of New Orleans. It's at a place called the Pontchartrain Center. Now, of course, this venue could change, but it has been at the Pontchartrain Center for many years now. There are 2 breaks each day, one in the morning and one at lunch. The morning break is pretty short, and so most people just have time to run to the restroom or stretch, get out of their chair. At lunch, you do have more time to sit and actually eat and maybe do a little bit of a quick review for the last exam of the day. There are 9 separate examinations over the course of these 3 days. 5 sections or 5 exams are considered code. 4 sections or exams are considered non-code. So what does that mean exactly? Well, I'll give you a little bit more information about that. So the first 5 sections you see here in this PowerPoint, Code 1, Code 2, Code 3, Louisiana Code of Civil Procedure, and torts, those are all considered code sections of this bar exam. The business entities, constitutional law, criminal law, procedure and evidence, and federal jurisdiction and procedure sections, those are considered to be non-code. And so if you're thinking, well, what code are we talking about? Well, we have the Louisiana Civil Code here, and 5 of these sections we consider to be related to that. And of course, you see the Louisiana Code of Civil Procedure, that is actually its own code. So what does this look like exactly? On Monday, you have 3 tests. As we said, you have 9 total, 3 on Monday, 3 on Wednesday, and 3 on Friday. The first exam is 2 hours long. The second exam is 2 hours long. And the last exam of the day is 3 hours long. This same pattern continues Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Of course, the exams, though, each day will differ. So the first exam on Monday is something called Civil Code 1, and that's generally going to test you on property law and family law. In each of the law schools in Louisiana, these family law classes may be titled differently, but generally this section is property and family law. Code 2 is successions, donations, and trusts. Again, that's a 2-hour exam, and you can see the times that I've stated for you on this PowerPoint. The last exam of the day contains a lot of information. It is a 3-hour exam: obligations, contracts, sales and leases, security rights, and also liberative prescription. Those areas are tested at the end of the day on Monday. So this first day, for most people, especially someone who is common law trained, this will feel pretty daunting because it will contain the most information that would be new to someone who has not been trained in the civil law. On Wednesday, we continue with these code exams, except the last exam of the day is non-code. So the first exam is Louisiana Code of Civil Procedure. The second exam is torts, and the last exam of the day is business entities. Business entities also contains something called mandate that is tested. That's just Louisiana's version of agency law. It is a 3-hour exam, and what is interesting about this quote unquote non-code section, or the first non-code piece of this bar exam, is that even though it is considered to not be our Louisiana code, it does have some Louisiana portions to it, meaning that some Louisiana rules are tested. So even in this non-code section, Louisiana business entities rules will appear. On Friday, you hit the last 3 exams of the day. Constitutional law is in the morning, criminal law, procedure, and evidence, the second exam of the day, and then the final 3-hour exam is federal jurisdiction and procedure. Of these 3, criminal law, procedure, and evidence will also contain what I would call a Louisiana flair to it. It's Louisiana crimes, Louisiana procedure, Louisiana evidence. So in all of the sections of the bar exam, except constitutional law and federal jurisdiction and procedure, you can expect to be tested on Louisiana laws. So con law and Fed J&P are the only two that I would tell you do not contain anything Louisiana on them. So for someone coming from another state trained in common law, most of this bar exam will contain new information. Now, you will find through the course of studying that lots of common law topics are similar to civil law topics. So it's not that everything you're going to be studying will be completely different, but you will have to get used to the terminology because that will change. So what's the scoring like on this bar exam? It's very different from the common law bar exams, especially the uniform bar exam. You must earn 650 points out of 900. So that's a very different type of scoring that we have here. Again, we said there were 9 exams. That's approximately 22 subjects that you are tested on throughout the course of the 3-day bar. Each of these 9 exams is worth 100 points, which is how you get to the 900-point total. But again, you need 650 to pass. Code exams carry twice the weight of non-code exams when it comes to point value. This is something that I like people to be aware of, but I always advise people to not worry about this and study in such a sort of lopsided way as to give code all of your attention. While that may seem like it's a smart decision, I usually see that not working out for people. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But even though your code sections are worth more as far as point value goes, it is usually not a good idea to give code so much of your time that you don't give enough to non-code exams. They are all extremely important, and you need to be really ready for all 9 sections of this exam. If you pass in Louisiana, you do not know your score. You get a letter telling you, congratulations, you've passed, and everyone is happy, of course, to get that letter. If you fail, you do know your scores in all 9 sections of the exam. So you will get detailed information about how you did. You also get an opportunity to review your exam. And later on in this presentation, I'm going to be encouraging anyone who is in this position to take that opportunity to do the review. What about the actual exam itself? What's the structure like? Well, we have essay and multiple choice. And again, this is different from the uniform bar. And in a minute, I'll do a quick comparison to really give you a good idea of how this varies. But right now, this multiple choice section is on our bar exam is only 20%, and about 80% of the exam is essay. That can vary, but that is generally how it has been in the past. So unlike the uniform bar exam, where you have thousands of practice questions to review during your study time, that is not the case because the multiple choice questions in Louisiana are not released. They are not public. They are being banked. So we do not have many study tools for you when you are practicing multiple choice. And that's not anyone's fault. It's not going to be your commercial course's fault or anyone else's fault. It's really just a matter of these aren't released, and therefore it's difficult to recreate what we think these questions might look like when no one is seeing them besides those who have actually taken the exam. The essays, unlike the multiple choice, are public. So you will have many, many years of essays that you can review. The only model answers that you will have access to will be through your commercial course, and those will be written by professors or your lecturers who may be practicing attorneys. The Louisiana Committee on Bar Admissions does not release model answers for even the essays. So no multiple choice questions or answers are released, only essays are released, and no model answers from the committee. So when it comes to proper preparation for this bar exam, of course, I always recommend to anyone getting a commercial course, right? Especially if you are not trained in civil law. And even if you are, a commercial course, I think, is very important for many reasons. It keeps you on target, keeps you moving throughout what is usually a 10-week study period. And I think that that's really important for anyone. People ask all the time, well, what about the civil code? Should I buy that? Should I review that? Should I read that? Well, it depends on how much time you have. Of course, the civil code can be incredibly helpful. Much of what you're going to be tested on is in the civil code, and there are comments in the civil code. But if you are pressed for time and you are doing what I would call a typical study time of 10 to 12 weeks, you may not have time to read the civil code. And so that may be something that is helpful, but maybe time consuming. And so this is really a personal choice. The reason, or one of the many reasons to have a commercial course, is that newly enacted legislation in Louisiana is subject to a 6-month rule. So in many instances in common law land, especially in the uniform bar exam, new rules may not be tested for years. But in Louisiana, technically 6 months after the effective date of the legislation, then rules will be fair game to be tested. So this is different. And this is one of the many reasons why I tell people, be careful when you are studying. If you have old commercial study materials, I don't recommend that. I try and get everyone to get the most recent materials to make sure that any updates to rules are there for you, because that is really important. You don't want to miss points on an exam because you are learning old laws. So just as in any other bar exam in any other jurisdiction, or many others, I should say, not all do this, but we have a winter and a summer bar exam. So February and July, generally people study for about 10 weeks. And this, I say, when I say generally people, I mean most recent graduates. And that's because of when they are graduating from law school. So if you are a December graduate, usually you will start studying in early to mid-December, and then you study through February. And I have a question mark here, mainly because we don't exactly know when that February bar exam will be scheduled. Sometimes it's early in the month, sometimes it's the middle of the month, and sometimes it's the end. So I have a question mark because this is not always the same. Summer, however, is the same, and that is always the last week, the last full week of July. Again, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So most May graduates start studying in mid-May, and they study through the end of July. So again, roughly 10 weeks. Of course, if you are able to study longer, that's terrific, and I would always recommend that. At this time, we do not have commercial courses available that have what many of you know to be an extended study plan. In lots of common law jurisdictions, commercial courses offer you their lectures and their books and access to their website for many weeks beyond 10 to 12. In Louisiana, this is not yet available. So an extended study commercial course we don't yet have. But what do we have? So again, if you are new to Louisiana and you're looking around and you are coming up with not many options, that is because we are limited here. If you are used to having 5 or 6 or 8 different commercial course options and you're not finding that for Louisiana, it's because they don't exist. So we are limited in Louisiana regarding a commercial course. And generally, though, if you have taken a bar exam or if you have friends who have taken a bar exam and you are familiar with what these commercial courses provide, you will generally be getting the same type of information in Louisiana. So you get some sort of a study schedule, weekly assignments, sometimes daily assignments. Books will come with this. Now, sometimes your course, you can purchase the online version of the books only. Sometimes you will get the hard copy. If you have purchased an online version, and this, in my opinion, goes for any bar exam, be really careful with that. It's not that I tell you you shouldn't or can't purchase that, but you really have to be prepared to print lots of materials yourself. And I say this because once you are studying for such a long period of time, day in and day out, the eye strain and the fatigue that you are going to feel in looking at a computer screen is going to be pretty severe. So you really want to be able to get away from your computer. And if your only access to materials is online, then that's going to be really hard. So if you don't buy hard copies of books, which I always recommend, then I would recommend printing as much as you can so that you are not constantly on your computer screen. Of course, the commercial course will have lectures. For many people, this is sort of the foundational component to learn these civil law sections and exams. You will get many practice exams and model answers. Remember, these are not model answers from the state of Louisiana. These are model answers from your course, which will be written by professors or just lecturers who may be practicing attorneys. Oftentimes, you get questions and answers by email that you are able to interact with these lecturers and professors. Sometimes you have group coaching as part of your commercial course. And oftentimes you'll get feedback on practice exams. This is all generalized information. I am not representing a course, so I am just letting people know what I have seen to be available through commercial courses in Louisiana. So kind of getting back to the code versus non-code information, again, you'll see here I have the list of the 5 sections that are code and the 4 that are not code. I do want to emphasize to anyone studying for this bar exam, please be careful when it comes to your non-code subjects. I think it is human nature to gloss over those because you are generally more comfortable with them. So for example, most of you will have taken constitutional law or federal jurisdiction and procedure in school. And so when you get to those subjects, you feel a little bit better because it's not brand new to you. Now, of course, if you're civil law trained, then this will go for all the sections. You'll usually know a lot of this, and most of this bar exam information will be a review for you. But if you're common law trained, a lot of this will be brand new, which is sometimes very overwhelming for lots of people, and understandably so. But what that tends to do for a lot of people is it makes them gravitate to spending so much time trying to learn the code sections or anything that is unique to Louisiana, that they then tend to ignore the non-code sections because they think they know it well enough from school, and so they don't give it the right amount of time. I often tell just about anyone who will listen to please give the non-code sections their time. You need the points in all 9 sections of this bar exam, and glossing over something and knowing it generally is generally not good enough. So whatever you do, don't ignore your non-code sections, give them the time that they deserve. And I think when you take the bar exam, you will be happy that you did. And in general, this is just good advice for any studying of any bar exam. You will find that in every week, possibly every few weeks, you'll probably find some topics, excuse me, or some subjects that you don't like that are harder for you. My advice to anyone who's listening to this is when you get to a harder subject or something you don't like, and that's why it's harder for you, you have to give it more time. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to do that. But the truth is the only way that you're going to learn it is to really dig in and devote more time to it. So glossing over the things that you don't like could really work against you, especially if it ends up being heavily tested on your bar exam. You don't want to lose points just because you never learned something. So giving this exam the proper preparation time is really important. So again, if you are common law trained, some of the things that you might want to think about is, have you taken and passed another state's bar exam? How did you do in school? Do you know how you learn best? So the reason that I'm saying some of these things is if you have taken another bar exam, then the good news is you sort of know what's ahead of you when it comes to studying. Of course, what you are going to be studying for Louisiana is going to be very different. And again, this is going to be a very different bar exam. But the idea that you know there's a lot to learn in a short amount of time is really helpful because you're mentally prepared for what is a pretty heavy lift. So if you've taken another state's bar exam, yes, this will be different, but the day in, day out work and the studying that's required will not. And if anything, if you are common law trained, you may find this is going to take you longer. So don't think that this will be an easier exam. I think for many people, it will be a harder one, but it is good to already know what's ahead of you and what your studying will look like. What were your grades in law school? The only reason that I ask people to think about this is because if you did well in law school, provided that you took lots of tests under timed conditions that required memorization. And I say this because if you did lots of paper classes, lots of experiential classes, all that's terrific, but it doesn't necessarily translate to this bar exam. So my question to you would be, how did you do in the classes where you took a closed book final exam with heavy duty memorization? And that can help you remember how you learn best. Because for this bar exam, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, memorization is tremendously important and you must give it time. Many people struggle with memorization. Some people are really good at it and it comes very easily to them. That's sort of the first step in being able to take this bar exam and pass it, is being able to memorize lots of information pretty quickly. So generally, you may take longer to learn what you are studying just because the terms are going to be different. And you are going to have to retrain your brain to substitute civil law terms for common law terms. You are going to see many things, concepts, topics that are similar. And so it's not that everything is so incredibly different here, but you really do need to use the civil law terminology, and you cannot use common law terms on this bar exam. So it may just take you longer to rewire your memory and use the correct terms. So one of the things that would be great, if you can, not everyone can do this, but if you can start studying earlier, that could be helpful just to give yourself time to acclimate to the differences. So here's a comparison for anyone who's coming from out of state. In the UBE land, right, which many of you are very familiar with, you have 200 multiple choice questions that you take on the MBE. In Louisiana, as we said a minute ago, this is 20% of the entire exam. It does not have to be, but it has been 20% for quite some time now. When you are studying for the uniform bar exam, you have about 2,000 practice questions that you can take almost no matter which commercial course you use. In Louisiana, there are almost no multiple choice practice questions. Now, of course, a commercial course can give you some, but please remember, since the Louisiana multiple choice questions are not released, then your commercial course is doing its best to guess at what we think the Louisiana questions look like. There is an performance test or an MPT on the uniform bar exam, which again, most people know this. There is no performance test in Louisiana. So the big difference with a performance test, right, is you are working under pressure, you have a case file, you have a library, you are sifting through relevant versus irrelevant facts. In Louisiana, when you are reading hypos, whether they are the essays or the multiple choice, you should tell yourself that just about every fact you're reading is relevant and you need to pay attention to it. Again, with the UBE, essays are 30 minutes each. Well, as we saw a minute ago, you have 9 sections to this bar exam in Louisiana, and you have 2 and 3 hour exams. Again, since you do have a multiple choice section, your essays are not 2 and 3 hours long, but they are not 30 minutes. So if you take 20% away from the 2 and 3 hours, the rest of your exams will be, or the rest of the sections of those exams will be essay. So it's longer than 30 minutes. You will see as you start to practice that lots of these essays and hypos are long. Some of them are short, but many subparts can be included after long hypos. So you'll start to see the way that this test is structured. It varies among the 9 sections. So I don't want to tell you that there's one pattern. There isn't. So it's going to be varied. Some long hypos, some short hypos. And of course, the uniform bar exam is a 2-day bar. And as we've said, the Louisiana bar exam is a 3-day bar exam. As I mentioned a second ago, civil law terms are incredibly important. So as you study for this, please be sure as you are learning concepts that you realize, wait, this is really the same. It just has a different name. Please make sure that you learn the civil law term and use that on the bar exam. Because so many people ask me what the most difficult sections are, these are ideas of what I think of the sections I think are most difficult for people. Having done this for a long time, this is feedback from students and graduates. And so this is what I see, especially when people are asking for help. In Code 1, as you might remember, you're tested on family law and property. Property is definitely more difficult than family law for many reasons. In lots of instances, especially if you are young and going straight from undergrad through law school, you may not have really any experience with property. And so all of these concepts are new and not something that you can personally relate to. Unfortunately, for many people, everyone can relate to divorce or community property issues, assets and liabilities in a marriage. So I think the easier it is for you to relate to a subject, the easier it is for you to learn it. And in property, many people just don't have the life experience to be able to learn it very easily. So in Code 2, again, this is successions, donations, and trusts. Basically, what happens when someone passes away, either with a will or without a will. And in this section, I put all of this down, not because I think it's all difficult, but because I find that people are either really good at the Code 2 section or they're really not. And in many ways, because you are trying to figure out who inherits what property when someone passes away, it can be like a puzzle. And people are either good at the puzzle or they really don't like the puzzle at all. So I do think some people find Code 2 to be a hard section. In particular, trusts is an area where I think most people struggle. They do not gravitate to that. They don't learn it the way that they should, or they just aren't as comfortable with it. And so of the 3, trust is usually the area that most people will struggle with. Code 3, obligations, sales leases, security rights, and prescription. Those are, again, areas that I think, especially if you're younger, you just don't have that much experience with sales. Maybe you have leased an apartment and signed a contract like that, and so you understand it a little bit better. Security rights, you may have no experience with. And so I think that Code 3, because it is both a 3-hour exam and has lots of subjects that are usually not easy for someone who's young to relate to, I think people find this to be a harder section too. And then finally, Louisiana Code of Civil Procedure. This is basically the life of a case in the Louisiana courts. And of course, many people don't have experience, right? Because you are young and not yet practicing law. You have not been in the courts. And so again, it's not something people can easily relate to. The other problem with Louisiana Code of Civil Procedure is lots of questions ask little small details. And so this, as all sections of this bar exam, will focus on heavy duty memorization. And so this is something where, because you are memorizing and answering little tiny rules, I think over the course of 10 to 12 weeks, it's really easy to forget lots of detailed rules. And Louisiana Code of Civil Procedure has traditionally been filled with lots of small rules that you must memorize. So I think people find that difficult to do. Again, I've been saying this already, but I want to make sure that everyone hears memorization is tremendously important here. In many instances, if you were common law trained, lots of my common law graduates have said to me, we're encouraged to put the rules into our own words and then to explain it like that. In civil law, I don't know if people are encouraged to do this or not, but I think naturally we are gravitating to the precise terms of the civil code. And so when you are memorizing anything that is a Louisiana related, I really encourage people to use the precise terminology. You will get this in your commercial course. And of course, if you have the civil code, you will have it. I do not recommend that you memorize code articles verbatim. That's impossible unless you have a photographic memory, but precise terms are very important in my opinion. So what I mean by that is when you read a code article, you really need to think, what are the words in this code article that I should not change? And if I do change them, I'm possibly changing the meaning of the rule. You don't want to do that. When you're memorizing, you can, of course, put something into your own terms to help you understand it. But the official memorization and then the way you write it on the bar exam, I think you should be very precise as you can be. Well, when you're studying, I often get the question, do I have to work on weekends? And I hate to say the answer is yes, but the answer is yes. I do encourage this, and I'm going to tell you why. First, of course, you have to be very aware of burnout, and this can happen for anybody, whether you are young or older, taking your 3rd or 4th bar exam or your first one. Burnout is real, and if you work yourself too hard for too long, it could easily happen. I've seen it happen. So I don't want you to burn yourself out, but I do want you to be aware that because this is a condensed really study period of 10 weeks approximately, you are going to have lots of information to learn very quickly. And for most people, you need processing time. So what's going to happen is on the weekdays, you're going to have your commercial lectures. You're going to be doing some essay practice. You're going to be creating outlines or mind maps or flashcards. I really encourage you to do as much work for yourself as you can. The more that you do to create study materials, the better you will learn this. And of course, everyone does not have the luxury of time, but if you do, please use it to your advantage and build as many study tools for yourself as you can, because you will be learning in the process. So what happens on the weekends, and why do I think you need to work then too? Because these lectures are going to move very quickly, and each week you will have new ones. And sometimes one week will just be one subject, and sometimes it will be 2 subjects, and you will move very rapidly into the next subject. Well, by the weekend time, thinking of taking those days off seems terrific. The problem is you really need that time to process what you went over during the week. And I find this to be true whether you are civil law trained or common law trained. It is especially true if you are common law trained, because to think that you would watch a lecture, practice some exams, and immediately both understand and be able to quickly memorize everything you did that day, I find that to be pretty unrealistic. But if you give yourself time on the weekends to go back and process what you did, not necessarily rewatching lectures, but practicing more bar exams, doing more with your study materials, you will process and give your brain time to actually understand what you did very quickly during the week before. So I really encourage everyone who has the time to use both the weekdays and the weekends. When it comes to writing for this bar exam, and really I think that this is for any bar exam, but in particular for this one, I always encourage people to write clear, concise sentences. This is not the land of creative writing. It is the land of short sentences, few typos, capitalization, punctuation, not a lot of abbreviations, right? This is a professional exam. I think they want to see that you can write. Now, people have said before to me, well, I think if you can write, you can pass a bar exam. I do not agree with that. It's great if you can write, but you must know what you are talking about. So the memorization piece is very important. And then presenting the information to the grader and not making them work because you are giving them pretty clear, quick, short sentences with good information in it. I think that's essential. On this bar exam, at least as of the day of this recording, you do not get scratch paper. You can, though, and you do, get a hard copy of the bar. Remember, this could change, but as of this moment of this recording, you do get a physical copy of the bar exam. And I really encourage people to mark that up and take notes on the bar exam itself, because the more that you read and just hold in your memory, the harder it is. So writing on the hypo on the bar exam itself, I think can be very, very helpful. Organizing your thoughts ahead of time. Now, I don't mean that you should sit and outline your answer during the bar exam, but having a good structure of how you will answer questions before you sit down to take this bar exam will help you when you are under pretty intense time constraints. And my final piece of advice when it comes to writing is try not to leave anything blank. I have people all of the time who are coming out of the bar exam and trying to count points and saying, oh gosh, I think I only got 60 points out of 100. Usually people are very wrong with their thoughts because they're nervous and anxiety ridden while they're taking the exam. So they are just making themselves feel worse. But the truth is, the only time you know that you didn't get points for something you said is if you leave it blank. So always do your best to answer it, even if you don't really know the answer. Do your best. For repeat takers, right, it's pretty common. People have called me for advice under these circumstances. The first thing I'm going to ask a repeat taker is, did you review your prior bar exam answers? As I mentioned a minute ago, earlier in this presentation, you do get the opportunity to do that. And I really encourage people to review their answers. I think it's important. Sometimes you can see what a grader thought. They'll make comments and you can get a better idea of just how much you did or didn't know. When you are taking the bar exam, again, because you are under such pressure and you are feeling really anxiety ridden, you don't remember things very well. So going back to be able to see the answers later is helpful. Of course, I ask people, did you watch all of your commercial lectures and did you practice enough old exams? Both of those things are essential. You don't want to do one or the other. You want to do both. And so with any situation where I'm helping a repeat taker, we want to make sure to figure out the things that this person did right and the things that they did wrong so we can fix that the next go around. Memorization is usually a struggle for lots of people. And I do think that once people have not passed this bar exam, they realize that they knew things too generally. And again, I want to caution you against that. I want you to learn as much of this in as much detail as you can, because it's very important, I think, for the answers for this bar exam. Of course, I ask people, did you complete all 9 sections of the bar? Did you leave any answers blank? Because as I said a minute ago, we really want to avoid that, because that is the only time you know that you did not get any points. If timing has been an issue for you, then that would be something that I would talk to you about, because if you have struggled on all exams all through law school, then it would not be surprising if you were struggling on the bar exam as well. But for some people, the bar exam is the first time that they've struggled with time. And so something to consider, and something that just about everyone should do when they are doing practice exams, is do some timed. And that's really important, to practice in a way that you are going to actually mimic the day of the bar exam. So timed practice can be really helpful. Lots of practicing attorneys have contacted me throughout the years. And so very quick advice here for anyone who might be a practicing attorney coming into Louisiana to take this bar exam. In many instances, attorneys, because you are juggling so many things all the time, you're really better at managing your time, right, than a recent graduate. So that's a plus for you. But the downside is you're going to have to be better at managing your time because you usually don't have all day to study. Many times practicing attorneys are still practicing and their firm has not said, hey, go take Louisiana and take all of these weeks off. If your firm has done that, that's terrific. But in many instances, you are going to have to really condense what you do into a very small amount of time each day. Please, my recommendation, whether you are still practicing law or not, but especially if you are still practicing law, is to try and do some studying every single day. It's a lot and far too much, I think, to try and do just on the weekends. The other thing that could happen, depending on how long you've been out of law school and what your practice has been like, you may not be so great when it comes to memorization and study habits because you may not have been using your memory as much as you used to in school. Now, of course, if you're a trial attorney, then every time you're going to trial, your memory is really important. So you may have great memory or memorization habits. It just depends, but this could be something where you're a little rusty. The biggest piece of advice that I find for practicing attorneys is don't ignore a subject on this bar exam just because it is your area of practice. And so if you are in federal court all the time and you think, well, gosh, I know federal jurisdiction and procedure, I don't need to look at that. I would say, yes, you do. Please look at it, because what I have found with someone who is practicing is they know their area and what they do very, very well, of course, but the bar exam may not test in the exact way that you are practicing. So whatever you do, don't gloss over certain sections of the bar just because you really do have experience in it. If anything, stop, make sure, test yourself, study before you gloss over it. And I would never encourage anyone to gloss over it, but before you move on, I should say. Again, just for anybody, getting into the right mental space and staying in the right mental space is really important during a bar exam. Things happen and life does not stop while people are trying to study. So I really try and get people to stay connected, take help from family and friends. I don't like when people make major life changes unless they have no choice during the bar exam, because usually you really need to give this your time and focus. It is a big lift. It is going to take a lot out of you. And you really want to be able to stay in the right mental space to the greatest extent possible. And I do find when people are studying, especially for such a long period of time, and if they are doing it alone, this is really true. There are days and weeks that are just not so great. And this happens for everyone. And if I were taking another bar exam tomorrow, it would happen to me too. There would be subjects that I didn't like, things that I just didn't feel so great about. And so it's really typical for anyone, even practicing attorneys, to feel like, oh gosh, I'm not doing this well enough. I'm going to fail this bar exam. And what I would remind everyone listening to this of is the fact that you are going to have bad days and sometimes you're going to have bad weeks. But the idea is to sort of replay the record in your head. And even though you're going to have moments when you don't feel good, you really want to stop and tell yourself, okay, I have done all of these things up until this point. These are the reasons why I'm going to pass this exam. And people pass this thing every single year. So can I. So a little bit of anxiety about anything will help move you forward, but a lot can really stop you in your tracks. So don't let that happen. And it is something that happens to many people because it's a lot of time and you are going to be doing a lot of the same types of studying day in and day out. And that can become very monotonous and just hard. So here's my contact information if anybody needs anything else from me. I hope that you have found this helpful. I hope that this takes away a little bit of confusion for people coming in from out of state. And of course, if you're civil law trained, I hope that this helps clarify some things for you. There are so very many things I could have talked to you about, but I did want to just give you some general information in one presentation. And so I do hope that you found this helpful. And of course, good luck to everyone sitting for this bar exam. My last piece of advice is please take it seriously. It is a difficult exam, but you can pass it if you put in the right amount of time and effort. Good luck, everyone.